I have listened with interest to the argument around a Hobson's choice between career and family. But what troubles me, and also to your response to the Deputy Chief Justice around the public responsibility, the Section 27 right to ensure greater access to healthcare. But what troubles me is the balancing between these different issues, because what comes across, and correct me if I'm wrong, is something of a sense of that bluntly this isn't our problem. No. And that we have, if you can afford it, you get good healthcare in this country. In fact, first world healthcare, to the extent that foreigners are coming to access that healthcare. And we can't provide for our own people. But if we look at cities like Cape Town, at Groote Schuur, you wait 9 months for an MRI brain scan. If you have a child with a brain tumor, you must wait 9 months. If you have access to private health care in the city of Cape Town, you can access a brain scan today or tomorrow because it's urgent. That's not the same if you can't pay for it. And so that poses some very real balancing issues that are of concern that one needs to look at. And it seems to me that on the one hand, that if we look at the provisions in question, that we're trying to debate whether we can share resources. We're trying to see how we can best share resources and ensure that our citizens and the people in our country have access to proper health care. Whether you're a woman with breast cancer in the Eastern Cape or a woman in Johannesburg with breast cancer, whether you're a child of 10 with a brain tumor in the Eastern Cape or in Limpopo province, or whether you're a child with a brain tumor in Johannesburg or Cape Town. So my question really is, are there less restrictive means that you would suggest? Is it really a question that this is too restrictive, that we understand the government purpose being to ensure that there's an equitable distribution of resources, that there's some sharing of resources? And is it from your perspective that there are less restrictive means to achieve this? Because left purely to the private sector, we're sitting 30 years later where we have a greater and greater disparity between what's available and what's not.
Justice Savage, can I answer the question in 2 ways again, if I may? The first, because with respect, there really are 2 different questions. The first question that's being put to me is whether or not there is a potential for sharing of resources. The second question is whether or not there's a less intrusive way of achieving what the Certificate of Need provisions try to achieve. The second question is an easier question to answer, because what the affidavits show is that once you have tertiary hospitals in city centres, which is where you have a concentration of people and where the people who are most likely to be the nurses and the doctors are residing, ordinarily resident, so that they can staff those hospitals. And in circumstances where all of the resources, the supply technicians, the servicemen, service people, where all of those resources are readily available, they say it makes sense to urbanize. It makes sense to urbanize that type of resource and to allow people to come in, and that the money would be better spent, as HASA says its members do, on ambulatory and transport services, where you're then better able to efficiently utilize the resource in question. So HASA says there are better ways of doing it than forcing people to go somewhere else, to set up a hospital. They say the better way of doing it is to allow the hospitals to be developed where they should be, where economically they can be and where they're sustainable, and then to allow people to come into those hospitals. And the same thing with respect, I heard Justice Matopo talking about his experience in his village, where there was one doctor who came once a week. if a doctor could sustain a living in a village, then I have no doubt the doctor would come more than once a week. But if the doctor cannot do so, and that type of interaction where private facilities have outreach programs that train for the blind, that does the cataract surgeries and travels around, that type of facility is better. It's a less intrusive way than forcing somebody to go and live in a village. But the second question is the more difficult one. The second question that was put to me, Justice Savage, is how do we share resources? How do we share resources between public and private? And the answer to that question is, I don't know, except to say that section 36 to 40 has got nothing to do with sharing of private and public resources. There is nothing in sections 36 to 40 that talks to a way in which the private sector can be made to bring in people or to expend resources on people who are otherwise indigent. There's nothing in sections 36 to 40 that talks to how the private sector should be allowed or should even be obliged to make an MRI machine available to a child with a brain tumor rather than having to wait for 9 months. That is absent from sections 36 to 40.
Can I interrupt you there? I mean, perhaps it's not. I mean, if a certificate of need were to be issued in respect, for instance, of that sort of specialized machinery, then why have 20 of them in a small geographical area and none available in another province, for instance?
Well, because, Mr. Savage, and I'm sorry again to refer to it, but the unchallenged evidence before the court is that preventing somebody from having a machine in Johannesburg is not going to mean that a machine will pop up in a rural village somewhere else. Apart from anything else, you've got to be able to get the machine there. You've got to be able to service the machine. You've got to have a radiologist, you've got to have a radiographer, you've got to have nuclear containment facilities for an MRI machine. All of those things are things that HASA says, if you require us to put those up, we're not going to because we cannot.
Thank you.